Hey everyone. Ready to dive into something that's probably on all our minds right now?
I'm guessing we're talking about the future of Social Security.
You got it. We got this research paper sent in, and let me tell you, it's a beast, packed with all sorts of figures and projections. I figured we could break it down together, make a little more sense of it all.
Yeah, those academic papers can be a bit much
A
sometimes.
bit. They're practically a workout routine for your brain.
Right. But what struck me about this one was how it really brought the challenges facing Social Security into sharp focus. It's not just like opinions or speculation. They lay out the numbers, plain and simple.
And some of those numbers are kind of eye-opening, to say the least, like this whole thing about the worker-to-beneficiary ratio. Ever heard of it?
Oh, yeah, it's a big one.
So picture this. Back in 1950, you had 16 workers for every person collecting Social Security. 16 to 1.
A much different landscape back then.
Totally.
Yeah.
But now, fast forward to today, and that ratio has plummeted to just 2.8 workers for every beneficiary.
Yeah, that's a massive shift. Basically, you've got a shrinking pool of workers trying to support a growing number of retirees.
And that's got to put a strain on this system, right?
Absolutely. It raises huge questions about whether Social Security will be able to keep up in the long run, especially when you factor in things like, well, people are living longer now, which means they're collecting benefits for a lot longer.
Oh, for sure. I mean, living longer is fantastic, but it also means the system has to support us for longer, which adds another layer of pressure.
It's a double-edged sword, in a way.
And here's another thing that really jumped out at me from this paper, wage stagnation.
Right, that wages haven't kept pace with the rising cost of living.
Exactly. So even though we have more people working, the amount of money actually going into Social Security from payroll taxes, it's not growing fast enough.
Because if our paychecks aren't growing at the same rate as inflation, it limits how much we can even contribute to Social Security in the first place. It's a direct hit on the system's funding.
So we've got this shrinking worker-to-beneficiary ratio, longer lifespans, wages lagging behind, and it all kind of culminates in this big looming question, the Social Security Trust Fund.
The account where all those payroll taxes go.
Yep. And this research paper, get this, it projects that the trust fund could be completely depleted by as early as 2035.
Which is closer than we think.
That's like just around the corner. And if that happens,
Well, the paper suggests that it could mean a reduction in benefits. Can you imagine spending your life working, contributing, thinking you have that safety net, only to find out it might not be there in the same way you were counting on?
talk about a wake-up call.
Definitely a call to action at the very least.
And to be fair, this paper doesn't just dump all these problems on us and then just like mic drop.
It does offer some potential solutions.
It does. One of the most talked about ones is this idea of raising the retirement age.
Since people are living and working longer,
Makes sense on the surface, right? You work a bit longer, maybe
Right.
balances things out.
The paper acknowledges that, but it also raises some important questions about the realities of different professions. Someone working a physically demanding job their whole life might not have the luxury of just working longer.
It's like one solution might create a whole other set of problems for some people.
Exactly. There are always trade-offs to consider. And then there's the proposal of increasing payroll taxes.
Which, let's be honest, nobody loves the sound of that.
It's definitely a tough sell, but the logic is if we want to ensure Social Security is properly funded, we need to increase the contributions.
Take a bigger chunk out of our paychecks.
Essentially, yeah. But of course, there's a whole debate around the economic impact of that. Will it discourage job growth? How will it affect businesses, especially small businesses, already struggling?
It's a delicate dance, trying to find that balance between keeping Social Security solvent and, not tanking the economy in the process.
They're putting it lightly.
And then we get to the solution that always seems to get everyone riled up.
Means testing.
Ah, yes. The idea that your Social Security benefits would be, like, tailored to your financial situation.
So instead of everyone getting the same benefit, the amount you receive would be determined by factors like your income and assets.
So if you're sailing into retirement with a cushy investment portfolio and a hefty income stream, you might get a smaller Social Security benefit, or maybe even none at all.
Which in theory would free up more resources for those who really need it.
Right, those who are truly relying on Social Security as a lifeline. But it also raises a ton of questions about fairness.
Like, is it fair to essentially penalize people for being financially responsible and saving for their own retirement? And how do you even begin to define need in a fair and accurate way?
Yeah, it gets complicated quickly. So we've uncovered some pretty big, hairy challenges facing Social Security. But hey, at least that research paper didn't just leave us hanging, right? They did offer some potential solutions.
Yeah, those solutions might be a bit of a strong word, more like different paths we could take, each with its own set of, well, complexities and potential consequences.
Right, like picking the lesser of evils kind of thing.
In a way, yeah. There's no magic wand we can wave to fix everything. It's about weighing the options, understanding the trade-offs, and trying to find the least disruptive path forward.
Okay, that makes sense. So where do we even begin with these paths, as you call them?
Well, the paper dives into a bunch of them, but one of the most frequently discussed is raising the retirement age.
Ah, yeah, that one keeps coming up. The idea being people are living longer, working longer, so why not just bump up the age when you can start collecting those benefits?
Exactly. The logic seems pretty straightforward on the surface. But then, you start peeling back the layers, and you realize it's not quite so simple.
How so?
Well, for one thing, not all jobs are created equal. I mean, it's one thing if you're sitting at a desk all day. But what about people in physically demanding jobs? Construction workers, nurses, firefighters, can we realistically expect them to keep working into their late 60s or even 70s?
Yeah, that's a good point. Raising the retirement age might sound good on paper, but it could create a real hardship for a lot of people.
It's a classic example of a solution that might look elegant in theory, but could have some really uneven consequences in practice.
Totally. So what else is on the table?
Well, there's the always popular idea of increasing payroll taxes.
Let me guess, that's the one everybody just loves to hate.
Pretty much, yeah. Nobody likes the idea of forking over more of their hard-earned paycheck, right?
Right. But I also get it. I mean, if we want Social Security to be around for future generations, something's got to give. And more money has to come from somewhere.
That's the crux of the argument, yeah. If we want to ensure the system's solvency for the long haul, we need to increase the contributions.
Okay, I follow that. But isn't there a risk that, like, if you take more money out of people's paychecks, it could actually hurt the economy? Like, people will have less money to spend, businesses might suffer.
That's the billion-dollar question, right? And it's something economists are constantly debating. There's a real balancing act here. We need to find that sweet spot where we can bolster Social Security's finances without throwing the economy under the bus in the process.
Right, because that wouldn't help anyone. Okay, so we've got raising the retirement age, which has its downsides. We've got increasing payroll taxes, which is kind of a necessary evil, but also a bit of a gamble. What else?
Well, there's another option that tends to, let's just say it tends to spark some lively debate whenever it comes up.
Oh, lay it on me. What is it?
Means testing.
Ah, yes, means testing. The idea that basically, instead of everyone getting the same Social Security benefits, the amount you receive would be, well, it would depend on your financial situation, right?
Exactly. It's about tailoring benefits to an individual's needs.
So, like, if you're sitting on a big pile of cash, you might get a smaller Social Security check, or maybe even none at all. Whereas someone who's really depending on Social Security as their primary source of income, they would get a bigger benefit.
That's the general idea, yeah. It's a way to try and make the system more progressive, ensuring that those who need it most are getting the most support.
Okay, I see the logic there. But doesn't that also raise some questions about fairness? Like, if you've worked hard your whole life, been responsible, saved for retirement, should you really be penalized for that by getting less from Social Security?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And it's one that gets to the very heart of how we view social safety nets. Should they be a universal safety net available to everyone regardless of their income? Or should they be more targeted, focused on those who truly need them the most?
Right, it's a values question as much as it is an economic one. So far, we've mostly been talking about, like, tweaking the current system, right? Raising the retirement age a bit, maybe taking a little more out of our paychecks. But this research paper, it doesn't stop there. It also dives into some solutions that are, well, let's just say they're a little more, shall we say, radical?
It's true. They definitely go there. And by there, I mean they explore some ideas that would fundamentally change how Social Security operates, not just tinkering around the edges.
Right, like full-on system overhaul kind of stuff. And one of those more out there ideas is this whole thing about eliminating the payroll tax cap.
Yes, the payroll tax cap, always a hot topic.
Because right now, you only pay Social Security taxes on a certain amount of your income, right? Like, after a certain point, you start paying those taxes, even if you make a ton more money.
Exactly. There's a ceiling on how much of your income is subject to those Social Security taxes. So someone making, say, a few $100,000 a year hits that ceiling, and they're done. They stop contributing. Meanwhile, someone making millions, tens of millions, they also stop contributing at that same point.
It's like you've paid your dues, now you're off the hook kind of thing.
In a way, yeah. And the argument for eliminating that cap is, well, it would bring in a ton more money, mostly from those higher earners.
Which could be a game changer for Social Security's finances, right? I mean, we're talking potentially billions, maybe even trillions of dollars more flowing into the system.
That's the idea, at least. But of course, it's not without its critics. Some people argue that it would discourage higher earners from, working or investing, which could ultimately hurt the economy.
Right, because if you're going to get taxed more, why bother making more?
Right, exactly. It disincentivizes that higher earning potential, which could have ripple effects throughout the economy. And then there's the fairness argument. Some people say, hey, these higher earners are already contributing a significant amount. Is it really fair to ask them to pay even more?
It's a tough one. And speaking of tough ones, the paper also explores this whole idea of investing a portion of Social Security funds in, get this, the stock market.
Yes. That's one that always gets people talking.
I bet. It's like Social Security play in the stock market. Sounds a little risky, no.
It definitely comes with risks. But the thinking is, if the government were to invest, cautiously, of course, some of those Social Security funds in the stock market, they could potentially generate much higher returns than they do now with those low-yield government bonds.
So it's like try to make the money grow faster to keep up with the growing number of people retiring and collecting benefits.
Exactly. Because those low-yield investments, they're safe, but they're not exactly keeping pace with inflation, let alone outpacing it.
Right. It's like your money is technically growing, but it's also losing value at the same time.
Precisely. So investing in the stock market, it's seen as a way to potentially boost those returns and ensure the long-term sustainability of the system.
But like you said, it's not without its risks.
Definitely not. The stock market can be incredibly volatile. It goes up, it goes down. Sometimes it does both in the same week. And that means there's a real risk that, those investments could actually lose money, especially during an economic downturn.
It's a gamble.
It is. And whether or not it's a gamble worth taking, well, that's a topic that's been fiercely debated for decades. There's no easy answer.
No easy answers. That seems to be a recurring theme here.
It does, doesn't it? But that brings us to perhaps the most radical proposal of them all.
Okay, hit me with it. What's the most radical idea on the table?
Privatization.
Privatization. Okay, so what does that even mean in the context of Social Security? Like, what would that look like?
Essentially, instead of paying into this big shared Social Security pool, imagine if you had your own individual retirement savings account.
Okay, so like instead of my money going to the government, I'd be in charge of my own retirement savings.
Exactly. You'd be in the driver's seat, choosing your own investments, managing your own risk, and ultimately reaping the rewards or facing the consequences of those decisions.
So it's like complete control over your retirement destiny.
Exactly. And those who support privatization, they argue that it would not only give individuals more control, but could potentially lead to higher returns. It's about personal responsibility, taking ownership of your future.
I can see the appeal, but I imagine there are also some pretty big concerns about that approach.
Absolutely. For starters, it puts a lot more responsibility and potentially risk on the individual. With the current system, you've got that guaranteed safety net.
Right. No matter what, you know you're going to get something when you retire.
Exactly. But with privatization, there's no such guarantee. It's all on you. And if the market tanks right before you retire, well, that's a risk you have to be willing to take.
That's a scary thought for a lot of people, especially those who maybe aren't that financially savvy or don't have a lot of extra cash to invest.
It is, and that's one of the biggest criticisms of privatization. Critics argue that it would disproportionately benefit those who are already financially well off, while leaving those who are struggling even more vulnerable.
Wow. So we've gone from like tweaking the retirement age to potentially upending the entire system. It's a lot to wrap your head around.
It is, but that's what makes this research paper so fascinating. It really forces us to confront some tough questions about the future of Social Security and what kind of system we want to have in place.
And the crazy thing is, there's no easy answer. Every option has its pros and cons, its winners and losers.
It's true, there's no magic bullet here, but I think that's why these conversations are so important. We need to be talking about these issues, understanding the trade-offs, and figuring out what kind of future we want to build for Social Security.
Absolutely. Because at the end of the day, this isn't just about numbers on a balance sheet. It's about people's lives. It's about ensuring that everyone has the opportunity to retire with dignity and security.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, on that note, I think we've given everyone plenty to chew on for today. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into the future of Social Security. It's been a fascinating and slightly terrifying journey.
It has. But hey, knowledge is power, right?
You got it. Until next time.
At the end of this podcast, please share your thoughts on the book, and if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like and subscribe for more.